Hello everyone and welcome to the session today. Let me just share my screen so you can see the content we'll be going through this afternoon. So bear with me a second. So today we're going to be talking around media performance and quality. Now, first of maybe just a piece of introduction to myself. My name is Nick Tulloch. I work as the VP of Account Management in EMEA at DoubleVerify. And today, wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about, brand safety and suitability, what it is, why it matters. Talk around a little bit about the evolution of privacy as well. Obviously, it's a hugely hot topic at the moment, particularly going into 2021. And then finally, I'll be joined by Arnaud from Zenith and Angelina from the IAB for a bit of a fireside chat towards the end. So first and foremost, let's go set the stage and jump straight in to talk about really what we mean by brand safety and suitability. Now, TAG's definition of brand safety is, in short, topics that no brands really want to appear against in order to protect their reputation and ensure no loss in actual business performance. Now, where that becomes slightly more nuanced and complex is when we move into content suitability. Now, this will often seem very straightforward, but it's actually more nuanced than it may first appear and ends up being a little bit more complex. So when it comes to brand suitability, one size definitely does not fit all. So for example, take this example in a screenshot we've got here from Cosmopolitan. Now, there's content here that may be absolutely brilliant and appropriate for many brands like, cosmetic companies, which is shown here. But for others, perhaps family or kid-friendly brands, they may not want their brand kind of associated with this type of content. So it really does depend on the individual brand and even individual products within those brands as to their tolerances and where they really do want to appear. And that's where you can imagine the complexity comes into play. Now, the volume of unsafe and unsuitable content online can make the digital advertising ecosystem particularly challenging. Advertisers need to be very mindful about how much content they are blocking and avoiding, which ultimately can limit scale and performance. Now, from a kind of DoubleVerify perspective, we always want block rates to be as low as physically possible because really it benefits the entire ecosystem from the advertiser itself all the way through to the sellers and the publishers on the rest of the ecosystem. And, the trick is to balance protection and scale, but that's much easier said than done, and it can be a little bit more difficult in practice. So what I wanted to quickly run through is a few kind of key questions that you can have in your arsenal to ask as you start to go on this journey and really start to balance out what is safe, suitable for your brand alongside what's ensuring you actually get that scale and volume across the markets to deliver your KPIs. So the first question, and this is really one of the biggest ones that we come across, particularly as a challenge at DoubleVerify, is questioning when was the last time you actually revisited your keyword list. Now, we often advise clients to try and keep their keyword list to as small as possible. Sometimes we see keyword lists of 100,000 words, and it's just not a viable solution, and that really can harm campaign performance and drive block rates up. It's worth remembering that keyword avoidance is really about just the keywords in the URL string. I'll talk a little bit more about brand safety and suitability in regards to actual content of the page, but it's worth reminding that keywords really should be reviewed on a regular basis and really aligned to breaking news stories or content kind of specific to your individual brand. Secondly, it's worth really making sure you're reviewing the data proactively. If your block rates have gone up significantly, really kind of drilling into that data to understand why, what's been driving that. Is it a particular media buy? Is it one of the targeting settings? What can be amended? Because more often than not, that can be amended down and brought back to a much more palatable rate. Is the content that you're advertising against, is that suitable for your brand? Are there particularly any sensitive types of content that you really want to avoid? And these sort of questions related to brand suitability are individual for brands, and it does take time to really consider this and how that aligns with the brand equity and reputation that you've built up over the years, and how then best to use the technology and targeting at your disposal to really kind of deliver against that. The final 2 points we actually have on this as well in terms of questions to ask are really around, targeting websites, and in particular kind of news websites, where often or not there's a lot of different content on the news websites themselves. And that's where often or not, advertisers try to get that, reach and volume, particularly on news web page homepages. So, going back to the Cosmopolitan example as well, is that may be really relevant for a particular advertiser. And if it is, make sure that you've got no settings which are conflicting with that as a setup. If there is a news website you do want to run across, that's absolutely fine, but you can also kind of add them maybe to an exception list to make sure that you could actually run just on the home page and maybe avoid or block certain content across the rest of the site. So there are often kind of tools at your disposal that you can start to leverage and really manage the block rates and scale that you're achieving across the ecosystem. Diving a little bit deeper into the tools at your disposal, at DV, we've got a number of kind of resources advertisers that use to build up what we call the kind of their brand safety profile. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes just going through each of these different tools in a bit more detail, which can then link obviously to the questions in the previous slide to help you kind of manage your targeting as effectively as possible. The first in this list are inclusion and exclusion lists. Now, inclusion lists include any websites or apps which you definitely are happy to appear on, whereas exclusion lists are lists of apps, websites and apps that you definitely do not want to appear on no matter what. Now, obviously in any one campaign, you can only either have a inclusion list or an exclusion list. And, there are different pros and cons and strategies surrounding that. And, it's one of the first steps you really do need to consider when setting up your campaigns to understand what approach do you want to take. And, that's something you can work with your verification provider, but also, your media agency as well, if you're working with one of those guys too. Now, as I mentioned earlier, DoubleVerify has content avoidance categories. So these are not in URL. This is actually the web content of the page itself. So DoubleVerify has an ontological approach driven by semantic science. So what that really means is that the technology can really understand the content of the page itself. So it understands the theme and the actual meaning behind the relationship between the different words to actually understand what that content is about. Now, we have over 75 different avoidance categories, and as you imagine, different brands and different advertisers select those at different levels. So it's really important to have that as a core part of your strategy to actually maximize what you're running against. As I mentioned earlier, keywords, it's really important just to maintain these keywords on a regular basis. I mean, we quite often see, keywords sit even on lists for several years. You see examples of, kind of London Bridge or Ariana Grande. And what you kind of find over time is they'll continue to block your content, even when it's actually on legitimate content you may actually want to target. So it's really important you do review these keyword lists really on a regular basis. And, we'd encourage really at least monthly just to go through them. Ordinarily, we'd kind of advise people to have, maximum 50 keywords on their list related to breaking news stories or very specific terms for their brand. And then finally, as well, as I kind of mentioned, if there's, a particular site or app that you really do want to appear on, make sure that you're enabling that within your settings to appear on that, so you're not blocking that content that you really did want to buy in the first place. So advertisers also obviously need to balance their quest for quality and media buying with user privacy. Now, the ecosystem is really rapidly changing, with user privacy being a core topic across the industry. Now, we found that 83% of internet users are concerned with privacy. Privacy regulations have, come into play, across like, GDPR, more often at CCPA actually as well. And, it's kind of compounded by the fact now that, cookies are obviously changing in their setups. So third-party cookies are going away, if you haven't heard that already. Safari and Firefox don't support these today, which accounts for around maybe 30% of desktop traffic. As of next year, Chrome will also stop supporting third-party cookies, which is, driving marketers to shift away from those kind of audience-based solutions. So what you begin to see is multi-touch attribution and cookie-based audience targeting are no longer viable long-term solutions to measure and optimize advertising initiatives. We found that over 2/3 of consumers, so about 69%, are more likely to look at an ad that is relevant to the content they are viewing. And almost half, so around 44%, say that they have recently actually tried a new brand thanks to a relevantly placed ad. Now, obviously, that ultimately should lead to more conversions as well. And, you know, when I think about it myself, you know, when a user is actively seeking and engaging with a specific type of content or topic, they kind of naturally are going to be more receptive to that relevant message. So DoubleVerify's custom contextual solution is privacy friendly, and it evaluates page level content so that advertisers can begin to leverage these insights to optimize and better serve ads that are more relevant to their consumers. Some benefits of contextual as we kind of go through this journey are, you know, first and foremost, it really does ensure there's accurate content classification and brand suitability and targeting through the kind of that use of machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies that I touched on earlier. And that kind of provides a really clear understanding of the content on that page. Additionally, you know, by nature, it supports consumer privacy as well, whilst maintaining that relevance. And that kind of targeting precision allows advertisers to reach users that are more likely at the final stages really of their buying journey. You know, if you think of an automotive advertiser, you know, if you're advertising on an automotive website, someone's actively researching a particular car or vehicle and you hit them at that point, they're in that particular mindset. And, you know, one of the big ones to me actually as well is it reduces ad fatigue, because the user, you know, only sees an ad in the right context rather at a time when maybe they're not so interested or in that particular mindset. So I want to provide some real quick, clear, you know, key takeaways from when you're thinking about driving media performance. And, you know, quality just has to be a, you know, key element to that. Brands need to be clear what content is suitable for them and really what is not. And that's a very individual approach and basis. What we also need to be mindful, though, of is that kind of user privacy element and use solutions that enable us to continue to drive media performance whilst kind of using those quality technologies in the space now. I mean, ultimately, you'll need to have a really clear understanding what is suitable for your brand and seek support really from your verification provider, media agency, and anyone else in the ecosystem to find out the best way to achieve this. Consider solutions, you know, that avoid using third-party cookies, such as contextual targeting, and that will continue to deliver that campaign performance and effectiveness. Okay, thank you. And look forward now to joining with Arno and Angelina at our fireside chat.
Hello there.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was I think quite educational, and you provided some great tips and solutions. But I wanted to get into one of the things that you talked about was really managing that contextual keyword list. And, you know, in terms of inclusion, exclusion to about 50 keywords, probably 50 to 100. Now, me coming from the agency side, I used to run ad ops for Dentsu and at Merkle. We had some pretty sensitive clients, especially in the financial services and the insurance business. But in general, a lot of our clients had more than 100, 200 keywords. So let's just get some clarification in terms of techniques, right? So do you need, for example, let's just say the word market crash, right? Do you need market crashing, market crashed with that, you know, past tense? How do you, in terms of iterations of those different types of terminologies, is it necessary to add those into your keyword list?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you know, first and foremost, what we've kind of found is as soon as you get over a certain number of keywords, they become unmanageable. If you end up with a list of, you know, 200, 300, or even 1,000, you know, we've actually seen multiple thousand before keywords. There's no way that as good as any media agency is or advertiser is, they're never going to be able to stay on top of those and manage those effectively. So what you do end up with inevitably is lots of keywords that are, you know, really redundant at the end of the day, or relate to terms which are of a bygone kind of news article, or, you know, something that's gone on, and that will, you know, invariably kind of lead to that higher block rate over time, which ultimately just really kind of harms the rest of the ecosystem. So what we try to really ensure is that we're leveraging the technology rather than that kind of human intervention. And by using the technology, and particularly the brand safety and the brand suitability content categories, we can actually use that. So you really use those as those crux, and then the keywords are kind of those breaking news, really specific things that you think, actually, for my brand, it may be, you know, a member of the board, or, you know, an ingredient in a particular, you know, recipe. I really do want to avoid this content. But to be honest, for the vast majority of cases, it really is about using those categories and being a little bit strategic about how you set them up as well.
And Arnaud, how are you working with the brands to kind of educate them on the keywords? Because again, being on the agency side, I know how easy that list can expand, because they'll look at everything in terms of the news and start throwing in news events that aren't necessarily related to their industry as well.
Yeah, I think you've said the right word. It's education. All about discussion. We really have to build with them and with our partners too, of course. So of course, education is not enough in certain cases. So we have to be quite pragmatic and show them that sometimes it doesn't work if you have too many keywords, and we have to find the right balance between the reach they need and also the brand safety they also want. So, you know, we can show through results and through campaigns what has worked, what has not worked, and be really pragmatic and educational, I think.
Yeah, and so can you talk a little bit more about the results? Nick had mentioned that, you know, there's efficiencies and it's more effective, there's flexibility. Can you talk specifically more about some brands that you've worked with where you've seen improvements on conversion rate and traffic quality to their websites?
Yeah, I think I can give lots of examples, because results are, yes, thanks to this kind of tools, results are better, of course, because I'm talking about media environment, of course, but we have also be quite cautious about the business, and that's what we are. We want to follow the business results of our clients. So I'm thinking about luxury clients where we really had very restrictive environments and restrictive keywords list. And thanks to what I was talking about, education and you know, showing results, we succeeded, I think, in being less restrictive and showing that we could have very good results too, even with thinner list, I would say, keyword list.
Yep, and one more question before we go over to Nick is, how frequently are your teams actually looking at the data? So Nick had mentioned that, you know, it should be looked at frequently, but what does frequently mean in your eyes?
Talking about what? Sorry, can you repeat the
looking at the reports and optimizing. How frequently do you look at the data? So Nick had mentioned that that brands and agencies should be looking at that data frequently, but what does frequently mean to you?
I have to say it can be every day, of course. It can depend on the goals of the client. If of course it's some performance campaigns and where we have to sell some products, of course it's several times in the day. We have to think about the optimizations, and the reporting can be less, but you know, the more frequently we can do that, the best the results will be. So yeah, every day is a minimum.
And Nick, there are some critics in our industry that say that we're not making enough impact and that there's still a lot of fraud out there, and there's a lot of bot traffic, and there are companies that are monetizing off of the inventory and not necessarily going to the right sources. What do you say to those critics?
I think, you know, the reality is that frauds is an evolving piece. You know, I think, you know, from a DoubleVerify perspective, one of the interesting evolutions we've seen is how, you know, frauds, you know, in particular has moved increasingly over to new channels like CTV. So, you know, what you find is, you know, to coin the phrase that, you know, fraud will follow the money. So, you know, the CPMs are higher in, you know, connected TV in particular, these sort of inventory. So the fraudsters naturally will try and move over to that area. So what you find is that it's not a, you know, a set part of the industry there, it's ticked off, it's finished, everyone's resolved the fraud problem, and we can all move on and we move on to the next solution. It's an evolving piece. So, DoubleVerify actually has a fraud lab where all day, every day is quite interesting. It blows my mind, actually, where they actually have machines set up to simulate and attract kind of different fraud techniques and actually analyze how that's being worked on. And you find that literally almost every day there's something new for those guys to pick up, and it's generally one of the most interesting parts actually of the verification space, and it just amazes me what people go to. But I think it's a challenge that will always exist for the industry, but I do feel that fortunately the technology is there to mitigate that as far as we possibly can, to make sure that when advertisers are buying media space, it is going to the right places.
And Arnaud, do your brands feel confident that the technology that is today, at least to our best ability, that it is doing what it's trying to do, and that the technology is not frivolous, if you will? How are your clients perceiving the brand safety ad verification technology? Is it effective?
Look, yeah. Actually, they are really confident, and you see that because on the market today, having a ad verification tool is totally mandatory. I don't have clients in mind which have not any tool of this kind. It was not right, I would say, 18 months or 2 years ago. But yeah, it's been a huge work of education from the ad verificators, from the agencies, from everybody. But now everybody is quite convinced that this is totally mandatory. That as I was saying, and we can show results again. Our clients and we are quite pragmatic. So once we can show good results, they are confident.
Yeah, and I think given the fact that you're right, there are bad guys out there, and there's constant new ways of doing fraud. So where you guys and companies like yours are doing their best to try and catch up and stay ahead of the game. So I commend all of you. Now going to regarding the difference between brand safety and brand suitability. Arnaud, how do you help brands in terms of other than just managing a inclusion and exclusion keyword list? How do you help them through the process of identifying what is suitable and what is not suitable? Is it just about keyword terms, or is there more to it?
It's mostly about keyword terms. So yes, how we work is mostly with our partners about ad verification, with the clients around the table and looking at the keyword list. So maybe not enough, not as often as we would like to do it. But yes, we are totally working in this direction. Yeah.
And Nick, are you using technology like AI or machine learning as well in monitoring fraud and suitability?
Yeah, so we use a kind of combination of AI and human review to really provide kind of a deterministic, policy-driven evaluation of the content itself. So it's kind of that mixture of trying to leverage the technology as far as we possibly can, but having that kind of human touch to kind of direct it in the right direction as well. So anything like you say, from machine learning through to AI, really helps us to understand what that content is on the page, which then the advertisers can then use to kind of decide how they want to approach and use that data. And I think the complexity does come into the fact that not all advertisers are the same. And there are huge nuances and variations to what one advertiser may find is completely suitable for their brand, and another which is wants to run a million miles the other direction because they think there's absolutely no way they want to be in that space.
And what about sentiment, monitoring sentiment or classifying sentiment? Is that something that your product offers? And what's your thoughts on sentiment?
Yeah, so I mean, DV's approach to classification is kind of moves aside or beyond simple sentiment. So the challenge we have with sentiment is that it can lead to misclassification and an introduction of bias. So to give an example is that all three of us could go to a web page. I may think it's completely positive, it's a brilliant story, you know, the writer's really positive about it. Noah may think it's, you know, terrible, you know, and it's not, you know, exactly, and you may be completely neutral. So, you know, from a sentiment perspective, it's not something that, you know, DoubleVerify is kind of embraced in that sense. So, you know, the methodology doesn't provide a distinct positive negative sentiment signal as a kind of complex layer. But, you know, what it does provide is an objective positive and negative aspect to a particular content topic. So it's less about how the writer's opinion is portrayed in the piece, but more about what is that topic actually about. I mean, you know, this year you've seen a lot to do with obviously the pandemic and coronavirus. So, you know, it's much easier for us to say this is a positive story as such about, you know, the pandemic, because it talks about the improvement of maybe work-life balance or something else. And of course, there could be negative elements that we can kind of deterministically, you know, quantify and categorize. But someone's opinion around it, it gets a little bit messy. So that's where we don't get too involved in.
Which leads me to my next question to Arnaud, right? We talked about the pandemic and the coronavirus. Now, this year has really thrown a wrench in what we consider normal, right? And what are some of the steps that you're recommending to brands that you work with that have taken a pivot in their digital strategy due to the uncertainty of 2020? Like, what advice are you giving them as they navigate this quote unquote new normal?
Actually, what I think 2020, it's that it's not been a total revolution for digital. It's been more an acceleration, I think, that we've done in 6 or 9 months. We would have done it in maybe 2 or 3 years. So that's the first thing. And in this quite a complicated environment, I would say, the first advices I have is mostly for my teams to be very agile and to be, you know, reactive, because what happened in 2020, it's not only the pandemic, it's also about, you know, this Black Lives Matter inclusivity topic. It's been also about the ecological transition. It's been the third party and the post-cookie world we are going to enter in. So it's been so many topics that we really have to support our clients, being really reactive, doing education, and being very humble, I would say, because we don't know what is going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. So yes, being humble and working with our clients and our partners and thinking about what we can do, find the best solutions, but maybe it's very short-term solution we will find. I think that's the best way we can work today, because yes, that's quite a special moment we are living.
Now, moving on to a separate topic, I want to talk about my favorite topic, which is around measurement. So let's talk about the future and the quality of measurement. And either of you can answer. So where do you see the combination of safety, suitability, performance measurement going, right? In terms of viewability standards, for display, we have 50% of pixels in view for 1 second. For video, it's for 2. Has this helped to improve quality and user experience, and are these standards enough?
I can start to answer. Yeah, of course, the standards have helped to get more qualitative diffusion and more qualitative measurements. We can go further. We can go further to the standards if we are able to keep the same productivity in buying. I want to say, if we do further standards and we buy very in a very expensive manner, no, that doesn't work. We really have to keep this productivity in buying. This the business keeping the same for our clients or being better. And yes, if all this is okay, we can go in further standards. For instance, I have some clients in mind, like Nestle, who are doing 100% and 2 or 3 seconds. I don't remember, but yeah, the results are better with this new standard because we can offer them better diffusion, better quality in the diffusion, and so better results. But if we are not able to do that, let's keep the standards, and it will be okay.
Yeah. And Nick, based on what you see, right, across all the accounts and campaigns that are running, do you see if there were stricter standards, would this benefit the advertiser or the publisher better, or would you see drop off? Or what's the impact?
I think it, to give a very politician answer, I think it probably depends slightly. I think, Arnaud's right in the fact that I think the guidelines given that a really good kind of baseline of, guidance on what to be analyzed. And, when we see advertisers move beyond those standards and have their own maybe custom viewability standards, it can work fine, but they really do need to link that back to their KPIs. So you can't just necessarily just change, the metric just for the sake of it. It's much better to understand what is the impact of me changing this to maybe, 3 seconds in view for video, 4 seconds. What does that really mean for my brand uplift or my conversions at the end of it? The danger, of course, is that, they have advertisers who may want, I want 100% always in view for 5 seconds, and you'll never buy any inventory, and if you do, it will cost an absolute fortune. So it's kind of that balance between what is the impact of the ad, but what is also kind of the actual outcome versus cost at the end of it as well.
Now, has the use of open measurement helped increase that confidence in both the buy side and the publisher side in terms of that quality that's being purchased in the programmatic ecosystem?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we've noticed kind of that, continued growth in particularly, OMSDK and open measurement traffic as well. And I think, it provides ultimately standardization really across the ecosystem. So, if I look at how digital's changed really over the past few years in particular, you start to see how it's started to grow up and standardize. So everyone ends up speaking the same language and everyone knows exactly what they're looking at. So, if you look at, anything from, OMSDK, it ensures that, there's a standard technology that, apps can use. They don't have to put in every single SDK in the market into their system, which doesn't help anyone. There's one standard kind of technology there. And same with kind of content, frameworks as well. If everyone's speaking the same language, it removes those discrepancies from the advertiser itself right through to the publisher to ensure that, there's less of that, I wanted to buy this, I thought I was selling that. And there's just, in the middle, there's confusion, blocks, and it's absolute chaos. So I think, as part of the industry getting more mature and digital just kind of evolving over time, it's kind of a key element to that.
Let's talk about privacy for a bit. Given the regulations like GDPR and the sunsetting of third-party cookies and identifiers, how concerned are you about finding alternate solutions to audience and third-party data targeting, Arnaud?
I'm not concerned because it's in the DNA of the digital to evolve and to change all the time. So we are quite used to that. But yes, that's what's challenging and interesting in our jobs. Again, it's been this last month has been a lot of education to our clients about all what is happening. And I'm not talking about only media or marketing people, but also to C-levels people, because it has a real impact on the organizations the brands can have. I'm thinking about all the the convergence between media and CRM brands have to follow, have to build. Sometimes it's quite difficult in the organization to do such things because this convergence is done through and thanks to the data. So not always easy. But again, not concerned. Really have to follow what is happening. It changes quite frequently, and there are new evolutions quite frequently. But again, that's a co-working between our partners, our advertisers, and us at the agencies to work on that.
And Nick, does DoubleVerify use cookies or identifiers at all when through your tag and the code?
No. So we don't actually use cookies across any of the products we're leveraging. So it's been interesting for us. And to be honest, I think it's some respects in the fact that DoubleVerify at its core is actually quite a tech-first focused company. So half our employees globally are still engineers and product people. So I think from that side we're kind of fortunate in we've got people already kind of thinking about this and ensuring that we're kind of set up for the future. So for us, it's been an interesting kind of evolution and something that doesn't necessarily impact us directly negatively, but I think as as an ecosystem as a whole, and particularly from a user privacy perspective, it's almost a good thing in that sense.
As you're seeing or watching the buy side react and so forth, are you seeing a surge in contextual targeting more so? Because I know that DoubleVerify, you also collect placement name, and so you kind of get some insights into what media plans or media campaigns look like, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think you're starting to see that shift where, advertisers are looking for different ways to reach their audiences by not using that third-party data element, which is, rapidly really disappearing. And, things like contextual provide kind of huge benefits really ultimately at the end of the day, because, it is highly accurate. The amount of data actually being analyzed to understand what the content on the page is absolutely ridiculous. So I've got a note down here that we have actually over 200,000 language independent concepts that they kind of use to understand what is actually going on the page. So kind of when I look at how digital's evolved over time, I remember when I started out in the industry, contextual was actually at the baseline, and then behavioral targeting came in, and now we're kind of moving back to contextual. But I think that the change of what contextual was then to now is completely different. It's so much more data heavy in its approach in terms of the the AI machine learning behind it, and just the ontological understanding of what's on a page. It's complete evolutionary change. And I think despite the fact that third party data is disappearing, and cookies and so forth, but like Arnaud mentioned, I do feel the technologies are there in the ecosystem that can replace or even evolve and move the industry forward again without negatively impacting campaign performance.
And Arnaud, do you believe that contextual will, that the phrase contextual is king, right? And so do you feel that contextual is going to win out, and that you'll see more shifts or recommend more investment towards a contextual targeted type of campaign? Or are you still looking for kind of the alternative solution to audience targeting, or some sort of replacement of audience targeting?
Look, I can see a shift, yes, but it's not totally, it's not a crazy shift. We can see it's quite slow, I would say. What we are seeing is an acceleration. Again, it's not new, but it's an acceleration on building your first-party data, the advertiser's first-party data. That's not new. Enriching, enlarging the first-party data thanks to second-party partnerships, this kind of mutualization of the data. Not new, but the brands are really thinking about it and accelerating it because of all what we spoke about. Do I have to build my own assets now? Do I have to build my own ID? Some brands are thinking about it. So we are supporting them in or not to do this kind of things, or relying on the existing. But I would say more, I see more the shift on this, on this first-party data than contextual. But of course, so let's see in the next months.
Now, one other, I don't want to assume that, in terms of brand safety, ad verification, brand suitability, that the solutions that are in place are pretty similar across the board. So let's talk about video, and how video inventory is very different from contextual inventory, and some of the challenges that are that companies face when trying to verify and contextualize video. So Nick, what's your perspective in terms of being able to monitor and really understand the context of videos?
Yeah, so I think video has been one of those areas which is almost been a bit of a challenge, I think, historically, a part of the advertising ecosystem. Historically it used to be mobile, and then it kind of moved over to video, and I'm sure going forward there'll be something else which kind of comes new and emerges, which also provide a tricky situation for everyone. But DoubleVerify itself has quite a comprehensive solution for ensuring kind of active protection across video. So historically there are really two methods of control for video buys in the ecosystem. You got your pre-bid avoidance, and of course then you've kind of got your blocking at the end of it as well. So DoubleVerify actually recently invented a new layer to that called video filtering. So video filtering really enables advertisers to kind of further minimize video infractions related to brand safety, geo, fraud, by filtering out non-compliant ad requests. So while pre-bid avoidance, provides a decision on whether to bid on inventory or not in a DSP, and then kind of blocking provides that, decision on whether to actually render the ad. Filtering then provides a decision at the time the ad creative is, actually requested and served. What's interesting actually about that as well is that the solution works across all devices, environments, whether that's, direct on a website or CTV, and it actually enables as well to any of the traffic which is filtered out to be remonetized by publishers themselves. So it's kind of an evolving space, and I kind of do see it kind of evolving again over time. But there are kind of solutions like this now coming into play more and more, which kind of help us along that journey into, really, protecting advertisers and really understanding where, that ads are actually going to appear in real time.
Arnaud, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. I won't go in the technical explanation, as Nick is doing very well. The only thing is that in France we have lots of advertisers like L'Oréal or the luxury brands working with videos. So very important important things that we were speaking about. So I'm just quite happy with these new solutions.
Yeah, and I think some of the work that the Tech Lab is also doing around OMID and BAS will help even more. So we have a few more minutes. So one last question for the both of you. Let's talk about what strategies do you think will continue to stay, and how will advertisers continue to evolve and innovate as we head into 2021?
What we saw in 2020, like the rise of social commerce, clienteling, this kind of digital strategies. Of course, it will accelerate in 2021. What I see also is all about the content creation with SVOD and VOD. I'm managing the Disney account, so I know what I'm talking about with Disney Plus, and all the content creation we are building around this new. It's not totally new, but it's totally accelerating. The product placement has been done since years, but now I think it's quite 2.0. I would say about that, creating content around product placement and interacting with the actors. That's kind of things we've done, and that's amazing results, I have to say. So yeah, I think 2021 will be an acceleration about that too.
Nick, your perspective?
Yeah, I think one thing that 2020, the year that has brought really to the fore, is that brands are really scrutinizing their brand safety and suitability policies, and it's becoming less of a tactical decision and becoming much more strategic. And we're seeing them review controls they have in place and taking steps necessary to ensure that everything's in that kind of right balance of protection and scale. And as kind of we move into 2021, I don't see that slowing down. I think that's going to continue to be an increased focus, particularly when we see, continued news stories about, pandemic, politics, social justice issues. It's, in the faster pace of the news cycle, it's going to become more and more of a critical part of a brand's approach. That where do they want to play in the ecosystem? What is their, approach to these sort of areas?
Well, so I'll give you, thank you for that. I'll give you my perspective. I think that there is going to be a shift in terms of marketers and buyers kind of accepting that they'll probably have less data to deal with, and that they will, in terms of attribution and being able to measure it the way that they do now, they're going to need to look at alternative solutions to, in terms of being able to collect that data in an anonymous way. There's some platforms out there that are helping to solve for it, but building out first-party audiences and creating audience segments off of that, but with in combination to contextual. So I think you're going to see a more marrying of audience first-party data and trying to sync it up with publishers direct. And not quite sure if there's scalability there, but they're taking the behavioral or the contextual data and kind of start doing a lot of modeling from that. But I thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. This was a great conversation, and I thank everyone that joined us and watched. So have a great day.
Thanks for having us. you.